So today we're going to have a look at the 3D clock. This is an F3N maneuver that's been in the set maneuvers since 2019. It's a K of 11.5, which is one of the highest, if not the highest. Effectively, it's a 12-point tick-tock rotation. So you're doing a 12-point tick-tock, and then while that's going on, you're actually rotating. So you'll start nose in, and then as soon as you get to the 3 o'clock and the 9 o'clock position, you'll be tail in, and then you'll finish nose in a nose in hover again. So if we have a look at it, this is a left rudder. Okay, so looks pretty complex, but once you've been through it a couple of times and you know what to look for and you start counting, it becomes a bit easier. So let's do a breakdown. So it starts in a nose in hover, and you pull up and you do your first tick-tock in the 1 o'clock position. So there I'm in the 1 o'clock position. So I've slightly rotated as well. So that's 1, 2, 3. So this is the 3 o'clock position, and we are tail in. 4, 5, 6, which is nose down. 7, 8, 9, tail in. 10, 11, and down. Let's just run it again quickly so you can see and make sure you count the points. This is my preferred direction, which is a left rudder. There are essentially two ways you can go. You can go left rudder or right rudder. There's some slight variation on the number of tictocs you can do, but we'll get to that in a bit. So the reason I do this with a left rudder is that the pull-up seems to be a little bit easier. So you pull up, and now because your tail is actually thrusting the model to the right, when you do that first tick-tock, it kind of stops you moving too far over. So you get a nice, and then it pulls back over the center and you can see the center line. So that works. I find that the left rudder seems to work a little bit better on the start than a right rudder. We'll do 2, 3, right. So another thing you're going to notice here is your tail thrust at the moment is pushing the model down. So for one half of the maneuver, the tail thrust will be pushing the model down, but for the other half of the maneuver, it'll be pushing it up. So depending on which right rudder direction you take, you may start easy or end easier. Okay, so this one with the left rudder is a little bit more difficult because you've got to hold the model up in the 3 o'clock position. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Right, so 9. So here you've got the tail thrust pushing down, so the model is going to float a little bit more. You've also got to be careful it doesn't lift too much. But now you're going through the easier half where the model just kind of floats. You can relax a bit and start concentrating on how you're going to end this. 10, 11, and down. And the model seems to settle quite well. That's when I find when you're doing a left rudder. So if we have a look at the right rudder, so right rudder, 2, 3. Okay, so let's go have a look at that. So with the right rudder, you pull back. Now the tail thrust is already pushing you over to the right, but you're going to be rotating and stopping the other way. So you kind of go over there, and then as you pull back, you're already drifting away. So you'll just see it just tends to drift to the right a little bit more because the model's being pushed that way. So we're already off center to the right. Also in terms of the thrust, tail thrust. 3. Right, so the thrust at the moment is actually holding you up. So the tick-tocks are going to be fairly easy. So right rudder tends to be easier in the beginning for the first half and then more difficult for the second half. So let's just go into the second half. 6. Right, so here's your 9 o'clock position, your tail in, the tail thrust is pointing you down. So you're actually struggling a little bit more in this half. And down. and I find that for some reason the model doesn't seem to settle quite as well at the end. It's either from because of the direction that it's coming from, or it's possibly just lack of practice on my part. So another thing we want to look at is the number of tictocs you can do. So the description actually says 12 tictocs, but it doesn't define the start and the end, so it's actually a bit loose. Some people do 13 tictocs, and you can actually get away with up to 14. So if we show you a version where we put in an extra tick-tock at the beginning and the end, so here we go, first one and 1, 2, 3. Nine, 10, 11, 12, and final one and down. So technically you can get away with up to 14 tictocs. But you may have to, if you want to go for 14, you may have to do a little bit of convincing of the judges. It's a personal preference thing. Possibly it's maybe you want to steady the model on that first tick-tock, but worth giving it a go. So let's critique that first 3D clock. Here we go. So it's drifting a little bit too much right of the center. That 6 is pretty awful. Drifting a little bit too much right again. And we're not in the center when we finish. So in general the height was pretty good, but definitely a little bit of drifting going on, and the distance was fairly reasonable as well. So how do we go about learning this? Well, there is a guide on the FAI website that contains the description of how to do the 3D clock. There is also a diagram, which is this bit here. The diagram in this case is not particularly useful. And then in terms of practice, for this maneuver you don't really need to use the Pyro trainer. You pretty much need to go onto the simulator and start bashing out tictocs. You've obviously got to be able to do skids in 12-point tick-tock, and then it's just a case of practicing each of the points individually, mixing it up, reversing, changing direction. I couldn't find a really smart way of doing it. It's pretty much a brute force, learning through brute force. So good luck.